Scientific, it's
I'm a licensed professional structural engineer with 37 years of experience in the structural field.
I'm a structural engineer with over 40 years experience in engineering.
Licensed architect in the state of New York for 25 years.
I'm a licensed fire protection engineer.
I'm a mechanical engineer.
Licensed fire protection engineer.
I have a bachelor's in metallurgical engineering.
I have a master's and PhD in chemical engineering.
I have a master's degree in civil and structural engineering.
I have a master's of science degree in civil engineering.
I have a bachelor's degree in physics, master's in education, another master's in mathematics.
I was a Green Beret for 6 years. I was trained in the use of demolitions.
I worked for Controlled Demolition Incorporated, CDI, the top-rated explosive demolition firm in the world.
I have published close to 60 peer-reviewed papers.
My PhD is in aeronautics and nuclear engineering from Caltech, and I did my postdoctoral work at the von Karman Institute in Brussels, Belgium, in finite element analysis. I taught at 5 colleges and universities, serving as department head and assistant dean.
I've been teaching science for many years, since I was about 16, and have published I don't know how many papers, but certainly over 100, probably closer to 200.
I knew from day one that this was a controlled event.
The conclusion of explosives is definitive.
The only thing that I can see that would be capable of doing this would be explosive devices.
I certainly believe that it had to have been controlled demolition.
There was just no logical explanation for that building to come down, straight down into the path of greatest resistance in a little less than 10 seconds. Did not make sense.
It cannot happen that when you have asymmetric damage, you will get a perfectly symmetrical collapse.
There are columns of steel around the exterior of the building and within the core, all of which are there to prevent the thing from falling down. And so even if something falls on it, it's not going to immediately just go pop, 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 pop like that, floor by floor. If it's going to collapse, it's going to have to take some time to weaken the structure below it.
You're looking for a jolt, that this thing, if it actually comes down and hit, you should be able to see the point at which they actually impact, because it would actually slow down the motion of the falling block. It never slows down. It accelerates the entire time.
The buildings actually accelerated as they came down, meaning they were not getting resistance from these massive columns in the center of the core of this building. The core of this building was very heavy. They're huge columns, huge.
Less than 1.5% of the steel that NIST actually got showed that it experienced any temperatures where steel would actually lose strength. 98.5% of the steel they got showed it would not lose, it had not lost, had not experienced temperatures where it would lose any strength at all.
The fires were not that hot. If you look at the NIST zone data, you could see this.
This violates the laws of physics. It can't happen. Those aircraft and those fires could not cause those buildings to come down in that way.
The buildings came down because there was very carefully controlled demolition with high explosives that had been planted many weeks, if not months before.
We have been told nothing but lies about this, folks. The government has lied to us, and we need to get to the truth.
Over the past 2 decades, thousands of architects, engineers, scientists, and other experts led by Richard Gage, they have put their reputations and their careers on the line, claiming that 9/11 was in fact an inside job.
I represent 3,000 architects and engineers across the country and around the world who are demanding a new investigation.
Now, of course, the incredulous retort to anybody that questions the official story of 9/11 is that the government already conducted a meticulous official investigation into all of this. But according to the lead investigators of the official 9/11 Commission, that's simply not true.
Lee and I write in our book that we think the commission in many ways was set up to fail because we had not enough money. We didn't have enough time.
We thought we were set up to fail. We had a very short time frame. Indeed, we had to get it extended. We did not have enough money.
The president has said only a minority of the commission can see a minority of the documents, and then they have to clear what they're going to say to the rest of the commission with the White House. I am in favor of subpoenaing the White House for the documents we need so that all the commissioners can get to see all the documents that we need. That's the only way we can face the American people and the families and say we have done a thorough investigation independently of the White House and the entire executive branch.
Why won't they let you see this? What do they say?
Access. They don't want any more eyeballs to see their documents than they can possibly get away with. It's a scam. It's absolutely disgusting.
People will be investigating 9/11 for the next 100 years in this country. And they're going to find out some things that we missed.
Now, to help further put this into perspective, the 9/11 Commission was granted a pathetic $15 million to investigate what is considered to be the greatest crime in United States history, in which almost 3,000 were killed. Now compare that to the $25 million that was spent on the Mueller investigation, the $60 million spent on the Whitewater investigation, or the $400 million that was spent on the Space Shuttle Columbia investigation, in which only 7 people died. But there wasn't just a lack of money to conduct a proper investigation, guys. There was also an obvious cover-up.
We pressed early on for a full-scale investigation, and of course one of the issues was, while we were doing that, the evidence from the buildings was being destroyed.
Everything was scooped up, and all of a sudden they had a big incentive to recycle steel for some reason.
All of the evidence was removed. You can't do science without evidence. This is not only unscientific, it's illegal.
National Fire Protection Association Guide number 921 calls for saving the evidence and being prepared to justify why you wouldn't. It also calls for testing for accelerants and explosives when high-order damage is involved. And this did not do this.
And it wasn't just the criminal destruction of forensic evidence either. They also censored and suppressed key eyewitness testimony.
You heard explosions, like boom. It has like a distinct sound. It's not like when in compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something.
Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor.
Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was if they had detonated. They were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
From the corner, boom, 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 boom. Just like 20 straight hits. And as the bombs were going, people just started running. And I sat there and watched a few of them explode.
The bomb hit the lobby first, and a couple of seconds in the first plane hit.
Think a bomb went off in the lobby first, then a plane hit the building.
Most notable amongst this testimony was former World Trade Center employee William Rodriguez, who claimed that he heard an explosion from below in the basement before any plane even hit.
Boom! An explosion so hard that pushed us upwards. Upwards. And at that moment, I thought it was the mechanical room where they have all the pumps and the generators for the building, that maybe a generator just blew up on the basement. Now, 20 years in the building, you know something that comes from the bottom and something that comes from the top. And when I went to verbalize that it was a generator, we hear, boom, all the way on the top. The impact of the plane on the top.
I was a janitor. Like I said, on that day, there was an explosion on the basement, and this is prior to the building got hit by the plane. And then the plane hit, and then there was a series of explosions afterwards. I was one of the persons that testified for the 9/11 Commission, and my testimony doesn't appear on the final report. I testify behind closed doors. They didn't want me to do the testimony in an open hearing. Everything else, everybody else, open hearings. You saw the hearings. The final report shows up. What a surprise. My whole testimony was omitted. It doesn't appear.
But what's even more significant than the destruction of forensic evidence that could potentially prove the use of explosives, or the censorship of key eyewitness testimony of explosives, guys, is the fact that numerous independent scientists have since been able to study dust samples from the wreckage at 9/11, and what they have consistently found is high explosive thermetic materials.
In the dust, we found what we characterize as unreacted thermitic material, which cannot be accounted for by any other explanation, any other process going on than this was deliberately put in the towers for the purpose of bringing them down.
Now, of course, there are always going to be people who will cynically claim that in spite of their impressive credentials, these scientists are manipulating their research. But their primary study, which has been peer-reviewed and subsequently published in a science journal, has never officially been refuted, guys. And then in addition to that, these materials are so sophisticated and costly to make that they cannot be so easily reproduced.
This wasn't some guys working in caves in Afghanistan, or it wasn't somebody in their basement doing this. This was, a massive engineering operation that made these materials.
But that actual scientific research just scratches the surface of what this group of experts have done to elucidate the truth. In fact, more recently, and this is huge, Professor Leroy Halsey of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, he and his team conducted a meticulous 4-year study into the collapse of Building 7, in which they conclude fire did not cause the collapse of World Trade Center 7. Instead, the collapse was due to a global failure involving the near simultaneous failure of every column in the building. And the only explanation for that, boys and girls, is controlled demolition. Now, as a result of this game-changing study, this group of experts, along with actual family members of 9/11 victims, they've come forward and are now suing the government.
So what do you want? Let's get to the bottom line before we're out of time.
I want truth. I've been lied to. I'm a parent who has an obligation to find out why my son was murdered. Why my son was murdered.
We are not crazy. We have questions. We demand answers.